Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. This lecture is for BBA 2. The subject is Principles of Microeconomics. This is our lecture number 10, which is delivered by Ms. Zahra Arif. Today in this lecture we will discuss about socialism, communalism, or centrally planned economy. Definition: a centrally planned economy is an economy where decisions on what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce are taken by the government in a centrally managed bureaucracy. Central planning is also referred to as a command economy or communist economy. Central planned economy. These are the characteristics of central planned economy, that is lack of freedom. Economic control required degree of political control. Bureaucratic. Economy managed by bureaucrats and reports. Innovative. Innovation difficult. No reward for taking risk and creating something new. Inefficient. Firm protected. Firms not allowed to fail. 5 years plan. Government set inflexible plans for future. Price control. No invisible hand of the market. Ownership of the industry is by the government. With central planning, the theory is that the government will take ownership of the means of the production and run the economy in the interest of the workers. The theoretical basis of a planned economy stems from the work of Karl Marx. Karl Marx is the person who is renowned for socialism. This is important for MCQs. To my mind, the so-called socialist society is not anything immutable. Its crucial difference from the present order consists naturally in production organized on the basis of common ownership by the nation of all means of production. In theory, a centrally planned economy can overcome market failure and achieve equality of distribution. Supporters of centrally planned economy argue that when economic decisions are left to the free market, monopolies emerge to exploit consumers. Furthermore, the capitalists, those who own private property, can earn money through exploiting the labor of others. A centrally planned economy allows a fair distribution of wealth. The Soviet Union announced 5-year plans where targets for steel production would be created. In the period 1928 to 1940 and after the Second World War, these 5-year plans were very successful in terms of expanding the Soviet Union's industrial production. The Soviet Union achieved very rapid rates of economic growth. However, by the 1960s, the system was struggling with corruption, inefficiency, and a lack of incentives. A rapid economic growth of the Stalin years also occurred against a backdrop of political repression. Examples of central planning: a Soviet Union 1970 to 1991 and a Soviet bloc. Number 2 is China until a late 17th and the Cuba. Features of centrally planned economy: ownership is by the government. Decisions on what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce is taken at national bureaucratic level. Prices usually are set by the price controls rather than by the market forces. Distribution according to ration books. Production could be planned for 5 years or 10 years in advance. It requires more levels of bureaucracy to manage and plan economic decisions. The scope of inefficiency due to lack of incentive. There is a scope of corruption due to power of bureaucrats. And often it required degree of political control and censorship. Problems of central planning economies. Governments are poor at predicting future trends. Lack of incentives when income is guaranteed. Next, inflexible. Difficult to respond to shortage and surpluses. Next, greater scope for corruption. Next, planned economies often associated with greater political repression. Next, people achieve targets for the sake of it rather than what is needed. There was a joke in the Soviet Union made by the worker. They pretended to pay us and we pretended to work. The goal was often to achieve targets rather than really meet needs. Therefore, as much efforts went into messaging figures and reports and producing socially. Now, we will distinguish between capitalism and socialism. The main difference between the capitalism and socialism is the extent of the government intervention in the economy. A capitalist economic system is characterized by the private ownership of the assets and businesses. A capitalist economy relies on free markets to determine prices, incomes, wealth, and distribution of goods. A socialist economic system is characterized by greater government intervention to reallocate the resources in the more egalitarian way, means in more manageable way. Capitalism versus socialism. Ownership. Assets owned by the private firms. Here, assets owned by the government. Equality. Income determined by market forces. Here, redistribution of income. Prices. Prices are determined by the market forces, that is supply and demand. In socialism, there is a price control which is set by the government. Then efficiency. Market incentive encourage firms to cut costs so they will produce efficiently. Whereas in socialism, government-owned firms have fewer incentive to be efficient. Taxes. In capitalism, taxes are limited. There is limited government spending. Whereas in socialism, there is high progressive taxes, high spending on public services. Healthcare. In capitalism, healthcare left to the free market. Whereas in socialism, healthcare provided by the government free at a point of use. The problem of capitalism is inequality, market failure, and monopoly. Whereas the problems of socialism is inefficiency of the state industry and less incentives. The advantages of capitalism: dynamic economy, incentives for innovations and economic growth. Whereas advantages of socialism is promotion of equality, attempt to overcome market failure. There are also different aims of economic system. Equality. Capitalism is unconcerned about equity. It is argued that inequality is essential to encourage innovation and economic development. Socialism is concerned with redistributing resources from the rich to poor. This is to ensure everyone has both equal opportunities and in some forms of in socialism, that is equal outcomes. Ownership. In capitalism, private businesses will be owned by the private individual or companies. Whereas in socialism, the state will own and control the main means of production. In some models of socialism, ownership would not be by the government but worker cooperatives. Next, efficiency. In capitalism, it is argued that the profit incentives encourages firms to be more efficient, cut costs and innovate new methods new products that people want. If firm fails to keep up, they will go out of the business, but this business's failure allows resources to follow the new, more efficient areas of the economy, something known as creative destruction. Whereas in socialism, it is argued that the state ownership often leads to inefficiency because workers and managers lack any real incentive to cut costs. One joke under Soviet communism was they pretend to pay us and we pretend to work. Unemployment. According to capitalist economic system, the state doesn't directly provide jobs. Therefore, in times of recession, unemployment in capitalist economic systems can rise to a very high levels. For example, 20% plus in Great Depression. Whereas in socialism, employment is often directly by the state. Therefore, the state can provide full employment even if workers are not doing anything particularly essential. Socialism is sometimes associated with Keynesian demand management, attempts to stimulate the economy in times of slump. Keynes himself was not a socialist. Price control. In capitalism, prices are determined by the market forces. Firms with monopoly power may be able to exploit their position and charge much higher prices. Whereas in socialism, prices are usually set by the government. This can lead to shortages and surpluses. This is the end. I hope that you understand, and the difference between capitalism and socialism is more important. Thank you. Allah Hafiz.